Hello, on this episode of How to Be a CEO, we're continuing our series looking at startup success stories. Pockit is a London-based fintech serving customers left behind by mainstream banks. It was launched in 2014, has more than 900,000 customers, and last summer it raised $10 million in funding. But it hasn't been all plain sailing. Its CEO, Virraj Jatania, spoke to the Evening Standard's business editor, Jonathan Prynn.
I thought it'd be useful for the listeners to just start off about when you first thought about going into business, and what was, perhaps you can tell us about your very first business venture.
So I grew up in a family business. My father and my uncle set up a consumer goods business, and I was not born when they started it. I was born in the late 80s, but I used to go to the office and board meetings from a young age, and used to spend a lot of time with my father seeing what he was doing. So I think that I would say kind of really set my grounding.
Did you consider other careers, or is it always a no-brainer?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did, but I graduated from UCL. I studied computer science and management. It was 2009 when I first graduated, and it wasn't, at that time everyone was going into banking jobs. It was all about investment banking. It wasn't what we see today, where I think you have a lot more entrepreneurs or a lot more people going into technology businesses. It was having the financial crisis having just hit. It was not a great time to be in banking. So I actually started working with my dad, and was working pretty closely with him, and that kind of really gave me exposure to sort of working with a great entrepreneur. We went through a bit of an exit journey at that stage as well, from between 2010 and 2013 of the family business. So I sort of got a bit of a front row seat to that whole or sort of the end of that journey, but it was very inspiring to see what can be built when you have pure dedication to an objective and a goal. And after we sold the business, I spent a bit of time working with my dad and setting up investment holding company. But quite soon into that, for me, I wanted to build something. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and the kind of inspiration for Pockit came from things that I'd sort of seen really growing up, because our family business operated in it was all in consumer goods, a number of emerging markets such as Nigeria, India. We spent time in sort of Yeltsin era Russia, pre-boom Dubai. So in a number of markets that were really emerging. And one of the things that we saw, and I spent a lot of time in these places, was the struggles that consumers faced, where they were restricted to access to mainstream financial services and banking services. So people were paid in cash and checks and into family members' accounts in these countries. I started to look into the space in a lot more detail. So it's 3 to 4 billion people globally are financially underserved. Pretty much every country and economic bloc has a huge challenge when it comes to this. So you have 100 million people in the US, 125 million people in Europe. You have obviously huge markets in countries like India, Nigeria, and other markets that we've sort of operated in. So it felt like there was a big global market opportunity, but also a big opportunity on our doorstep in the UK, where you have probably the bottom half of adults, so sort of 22 million adults, who are really poorly catered for when it comes to mainstream financial services. So everything from kind of banking to lending to savings, insurance products. And I then sort of spent a bit of time talking to banks to understand kind of how were they addressing this problem, and what were they doing. And it became very clear in those discussions that they didn't really have a real interest in servicing this segment of consumers. Post 0809, there was a real focus from banks to kind of really stick to their knitting, and that kind of meant there were opportunities for people like us to come into the market. So with my entrepreneurial childhood, in terms of growing up sort of with a family business, this opportunity we'd sort of spotted, and then kind of all the facts on the ground, and then with the evolution in kind of fintech and technology, it just felt to me that there was a no-brainer to set up Pockit, and then that's why we launched in 2015.
And at launch, you managed to persuade Alex Ferguson to invest in the business. What impact did that have in terms of publicity, and also what was it like dealing with someone so high profile?
For sure, it has a great impact, when you have such a respected individual to sort of support your company, and we obviously really benefited from that, and it added a lot of credibility alongside a lot of the other great investors that we've had in the business. And it was something that he was excited about, that we were building, and and something that I discussed with other members of his family, and that they were excited about. And so it's always been a pleasure sort of dealing with them, and very straightforward. And as a Manchester United fan, it was a great thing to be able to do.
How did that connection come about?
It was just through some mutual friends. I think as an entrepreneur, you've got to kind of always be meeting people. You've got to be, sometimes you'll think you're going to a meeting that doesn't have necessarily a direct output, but as you build your kind of network and your contacts, you just never know what might come around the corner. And this was sort of something that happened purely by chance, and someone introduced us, and I'm sort of very grateful to that person for doing that.
And you've obviously grown very quickly since that launch a few years ago. What are the sort of key lessons that you would give to other people, perhaps starting on that journey now?
I think in the early days, as a CEO, you have to be very scrappy. The usual entrepreneurial story, you kind of do everything from, making the teas and coffees for meetings to, pitching for investment to trying to build big partnerships. So I think, you have to do that, and you have to understand what it takes to operate your business. And, I've done customer service. I've gone and sat in customers' homes to learn about how they manage their money. You have to, and I think it's really important in the early days to be that in the detail and that close. And then I think, look, as you evolve, the challenges change, right? And I think for me, a lot of it comes down to people. I think you've got to build a great team, and you've got to find people who will challenge you, who will are smarter than you, will be complementary to you. I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen, because as you get bigger, you can't be in everything, and you can't do everything. So you've got to find those people who you trust, and who add their experience and their value into the business. And so for me, I think the biggest aspect has been one of the biggest aspects has been really finding great people to partner up in the business with me to help drive us forward. And I think the other thing that changes is sort of where you spend your time. For a business like ours, especially a sort of financial services business, we have regulatory aspects that we have to be thinking about. So you spend your time sort of interfacing with regulators, with trade bodies. Obviously we've raised about $50 million of capital into the business. So you're spending your time with existing investors, with new investors. You're trying to hire the best talent. So you're always speaking to people. You're looking at other strategic opportunities, whether different types of partnerships. So distribution partnerships, things like that. So you sort of are at a slightly higher level, and but it's really important for you to be the face of those conversations. And I think that's a very different skill set to being in the minutiae of the detail. And I think that's really how it evolves, and the changes that you get as you scale up and grow.
Do you miss those early sort of entrepreneurial experiences now that you have to spend a lot of time in meetings, as you say, with regulators and shareholders and other stakeholders?
Yeah, I think you do miss it sometimes. For me, the product is the bit that I get really excited about, and so I do still spend quite a bit of time with our product team to really make sure that we're building the best products, and we're making sure the customer journeys are great, that the wording we use is good. So I think you find your sort of little bit of time in your week to kind of spend the bits that still really excite you, but you just obviously don't have as much of that time available anymore to be doing it day in, day out. So I think it's important. You still have to stay close.
We'll have a short break now. Hit your follow button to make sure you don't miss any episodes of How to Be a CEO.
Like any business, it's no secret that Pockit you've had good times and not such good times. You had some headlines a few years ago when the financial situation was tougher, Talk us through that period and the sort of extra stresses and that brings, and how you got through it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the most stressful period, and probably the period you're alluding to, was sort of around 2020. To sort of share the kind of in sort of the details, we were quite close to completing quite a big funding round, and in right when COVID hit. And that ended up not happening because when COVID first hit, it was, no one saw the stimulus that was going to be put in by governments. No one saw, the way the stock market was going to rally back. So when it happened, there was a lot of panic, and that resulted in us losing our investment round that was, sort of quite close to happening. And so that was a tough moment. We had to really come up with a plan of how we were going to sort of get the business to closer to break even, and that was really, we've had great and supportive shareholders, but that was sort of a prerequisite from our shareholders to say that, look, we're happy to support a plan, but it has to be a plan that makes sense. And I think in that moment you really realize how much you can do with your team by sort of motivating them, by being transparent, by talking about things in real terms, the way they are. And so we built a plan that did involve cutting cost in the business and really kind of focusing on our core, really thinking about how we're going to optimize revenue, and have a really careful handle on costs. And I'm sort of really proud that we were able to do that. Obviously, it involves very tough conversations. You're losing some people who you've worked very closely with. It's never easy to go through those situations, but I think you have to take into account the circumstances which we're in. We're in a pandemic that had never been seen before, therefore requires drastic action. So 2020 was definitely a tough year. We also a few months after that had the Wirecard scandal, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but we used Wirecard as one of our banking partners, and they had an issue where they had a major gap on their balance sheet, and that led to them sort of really not being able to kind of stay in service for very long, and so we had to migrate away from them. So 2020 was definitely a very challenging year, but I think you've just got to have resilience, and I've seen that watching sort of my father build his business over the years. It's you never it's never one trajectory that you're always going and up to the right. It's things can go down, or you can have difficult years, and 2020 was definitely our difficult year.
And was there ever a moment, as you say, COVID was a totally unprecedented set of circumstances. Was there ever a moment where you thought, wow, we're not going to get through this? Yeah,
it's interesting. I actually, so the COVID bit, I felt there was a path through it. The Wirecard one was the one moment, I think, the one and only moment since I've been running the business that I felt, I'm not quite sure how we're going to get through this, because it was so out of our control, and it was, the FCA were quite involved, and they'd put a suspension on their license for 4 days. It ended up being 4 days, but we didn't know that when it first happened. So that to me felt like the one moment where I thought, well, we're not, you may not make it through this, and it's actually got nothing to do with you as a business. It's something completely sort of, you couldn't have seen it coming, and in that moment, again, I think sort of the resilience is really important. But the best piece of advice I actually got during that moment was about over communicating to customers, and we really ramped up the amount of communication we were sending to our customers via texts and emails and notifications in our app, and we really communicated sort of all the time to sort of keep them, whilst we understood it was a really difficult situation for them to be in, for us to be in, but we were trying to keep them in the loop as much as we possibly could, and I think that helped us because we actually, when things came back on after a few days, we hardly lost any customers, which was quite amazing, and I think showed the sort of the resilience of the team and the business, but also the product, and that the important role it plays in our customers' lives. So yeah, that was definitely one of those moments, I would say.
Well, you did get through it, and here to tell the tale. And how do you see? What are your ambitions now for the years ahead, and where do you hope the business to be in 5 or maybe 10 years' time?
Yeah, so we're really focused on I would say kind of 2 primary objectives. One is as I mentioned, we have about over 900,000 customers, which is a great achievement, but there's still so much more to do, and as I mentioned, the target market in the UK alone is sort of close to 20 million people. So we feel like we're just scratching the surface on from that perspective, and so we're really thinking a lot at the moment about how we grow and get our product into more customers' hands, and so that's a lot about thinking around how we improve our marketing, and how which at the moment we do. Most of our marketing comes through word of mouth and some digital advertising. We're looking at now going a bit more above the line, and looking at a number of different initiatives. We're doing some large scale partnerships which are going to yield big customer numbers for us. So there's a real focus on that, and secondly, the other big area that we're focusing on is about the products that we offer to our customers, because we know there's so much more that they need. We offer quite a bit today, but the segment that we serve, really the main challenge, the sort of common thread challenge they have is sort of cash flow volatility. So we're really thinking about how we help them solve that problem, and that's sort of either giving them access to more money, which is typically sort of lending products, and then there's the other side of that equation is how do you help them do more with the money that they have, and so that's helping them to save and budget and financial education, have insurance products to cover rainy days, helping them have savings accounts so they can earn a bit of interest on the deposits that they do have. So there are so many products and services that we're building out. So we're really focused on that, and that's and when I kind of think about our sort of 5-year kind of objectives, it's really about building the market leader for financial services for this underserved consumer segment in the UK, and we think there's a really big opportunity and an opportunity to go deep and wide in the UK market, and then we do have international aspirations as well. So I'm very hopeful that in that sort of 5-year timeline we'll be operating in a couple of other markets as well. But we want to be quite careful about how we choose which markets we go into. Just financial services is very obviously very highly regulated, but also it is it's culturally very different from country to country.
That was Virraj Jatania speaking to the Evening Standard business editor Jonathan Prynn. How to be a CEO. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll see you then.